look at your time clocks and tell me it's a nice... Look at the timestamp and tell me it's a nice short episode.
Yeah, it's not a long episode.
No. Well, those of you who are now laughing at how long this episode is get to...
It's just the two of us. It'll be so quick and easy.
I'm calling it. We're going to record for an hour and 35 minutes. Episode will be an hour and 14.
Okay. Future people, tell us how wrong we are. I don't know how you'll do that, but...
It means now that I have to edit it down to that exact time, no matter what.
You just set yourself a nice scenic bar.
This is Editing Seth, coming in a couple of days later. The final duration on my recorded audio was an hour 34:33, and this final episode length will be right at 1 hour and 13 minutes, so pretty damn close. Pretty damn close.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
This is a very name-heavy chapter, so we should be having fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, I made notes, so hopefully I'm not too out of it. But speaking of this chapter, this is chapter 16, A Touch on the Cheek, and the symbol is the Flame of Tarvalin.
There's a lot of Aes Sedaiing.
There is. And Matt interacting with them.
Mm-hmm. In ways that have implications. It's not just a world-building conversation. Like, things fall out from this conversation.
And the touch on the cheek is...
Tylin's first assault on Matt.
Involuntary contact.
Yeah. It's her first predatory moment towards him, which I think, she's got plans for her entire interaction with him at this point.
She also has a lot of ideas about him that aren't necessarily correct based on what the girls have been saying about him. There's a certain rationalness to her behavior based on what she thinks Matt is like.
Yeah, for sure. He's caught her eye at a distance and she wants a closer look. Yeah, that's what the touch on the cheek is about.
Which cheek exactly is she touching?
Well, the narrative implies that it's on his face. But
yeah.
There's a lot of cheeks to pick from.
There certainly are. Left cheek or right cheek, that's the question. The Tarisin Palace was a mass of shining marble and white plaster, with screened balconies of white painted wrought iron and columned walks as much as 4 stories above the ground. Pigeons wheeled around, pointed domes and tall, balcony-wreathed spires, banded in red and green tiles, glittering in the sun. Sharp arched gates in the palace itself led to various courtyards, and more piercing the high wall hiding the garden. But deep, snowy, white steps, 10 spans wide, climbed on the side facing Mulhara Square, to great doors carved in coiling patterns like the balcony screens, and covered with beaten gold. The dozen or so guards lined up before those doors, sweating in the sun, or in gilded breastplates. Excuse me, my tongue is being a little, Let me have some more of this beer. I'm sure that's going to help.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, drink water if you're trying to read out loud, folks. Not beer. That's
Seriously.
Definitely, my advice. The dozen or so guards lined up before those doors, sweating in the sun, wore gilded breastplates over green coats and baggy white trousers stuffed into dark green boots. Green cords secured thick twists of white cloth around glittering golden helmets, with the long ends hanging down their backs. Even their halberds and the scabbards of their daggers and short swords shone with gold. Guards for being looked at, not fighting. But then, when Matt reached the top, he could see the swordsman's calluses on their hands, always before he had entered through one of the stable yards to pursue the palace horses in passing. But this time, he was going in the way a lord would.
So there's some white. You mentioned white clothing on these guys that I hadn't noticed. And yeah, they're wearing white pants, even if it is gilded breastplates and dark green coats, which sounds miserable.
Yeah, there's a lot of clothing in the heat.
Ugh. Yeah. No.
Ebudar is already hot, right? It's the southern coast.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as a very Mediterranean type weather, but then also this is supposed to be in the middle of winter, and we know it's burning hot.
Right. And it's in the middle of a truncated winter that's not there in a place that normally doesn't see snow. Like, these are the people who are like, snow? I've heard about that. So, yeah.
These are the people from San Francisco who are just like, get really cold when it gets below. Oh my God. Oh, we gotta turn the heat on.
Yeah. I have several family members who, it's like, it's getting below 60. I'm going to make sure I have a sweater close to hand. It's like, oh, it's 60. I'm taking my sweater off. Would you like it?
I've got a completely unscientific theory that I've heard somewhere that where you are the first 2 years of your life, that sets your internal thermostat. And so the first 2 years of your life determine what you think is normal for cold.
I've heard that.
Like, that can change over time, right? But, like, spending my first 2 years in Nova Scotia, where the saltwater bay would freeze over outside our house.
That's cold.
That's cold, yeah. Although I think the years of living in Portland has thinned my blood a little bit.
Yeah, I'm living not very far from where I was born, climate-wise. And, I have no real desire to move to anywhere else. Yes, I like the temperate coastal sort of environment. That's fine.
I think Pacific Northwest really got some of the best weather in the world.
And you can adjust. Like, if it's a little bit too cold or a little bit too warm, like, you can move not that far away. And, like, you can go up into the mountains or, like, closer to the coast or over to the desert if you really want. Like,
we have a high gradient.
Yes, very much so. And that's nice. But yeah, I gotta love that marine tempering of the weather.
Yes. And I imagine normally Abu Dar has a lot of that, right? Being on the water, where, I mean, if we look at the continental map, there's nothing below them. It's all ocean down there. It would be like being on the Pacific Ocean. Yeah,
I do wonder about the ocean currents. I wonder if it would be more like the Gulf of Mexico with much warmer water, shallower ocean floor, as opposed to the deep Pacific Ocean coast. And like, we've got upwelling right along our coast, so that's why our ocean is so freaking cold.
Because there is a bit of a notch there, because Shara goes south significantly. And so there is a bit of a catch there, sort of in the corner between the waste and Abu Dar, and I could see where that might be a shallower, hotter water.
And we know that they get really raging storms, the Samaros, right? And those sound like hurricanes, which we don't really get over here because our ocean's too cold for now. Whereas the Gulf of Mexico obviously has a lot of heat to throw into those things. It's probably also really humid in Abu Dar. I think they even describe it as being humid. But that would make sense climate-wise. So the ocean's not always a plus, but can be.
I mean, people like to live on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Commerce, fishing, trade and commerce are the same damn thing. But,
people need to live near water. Like, that's where all the civilizations are. It's either on the coast or it's on a river. You don't put a civilization in a place without water, generally speaking.
It's why Emmons Field is where it is. There's a spring.
Mm-hmm. Yep, a spring and a river. That's what Manetheren was using, right? Was the fact that they had this big-ass river rolling by, so. The
Manetheren Drell, right? Like, it's it's sort of... It's amazing how much, civilization is tied to rivers. Which is one of the reasons why I'm always a little disappointed that there's a lack of ponds and big bodies of water on the map.
Mm-hmm. It's a little weird. He was too busy writing about clothes to be worried with little things like hydrology.
There's a lot of clothes in this chapter.
Oh, yes. Quite.
So Matt is up at the palace, and again, speaking of clothes, is not turned away because he's wearing a nice coat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he comes dressed to get through the door because he's trying to use his pretend identity as a lord to, like, make his path a little bit easier. So he's dressed properly, he's speaking properly.
But Matt is really... he can't pretend to be a lord because he is a lord.
He's not a bloody lord.
He's got lords working for him. He's got his own army. He's got his own fortune. He's works for the Dragon Reborn. He's a bloody lord.
Yeah.
Break it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it is.
He speaks the old tongue, which only educated people do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really the only thing that doesn't seem like a lord about him is his attitude, which just suggests that he's rich enough he doesn't have to care, which makes him more of a lord.
Exactly. Yeah, when you're so much a lord, you don't give a fuck about the trappings of being a lord, then it's like, whoa, that dude's, like, really powerful. He doesn't have to care about society. Mm-hmm. Like, he's above that.
Yeah, he's real upper management material.
I like that reference.
I just watched it the other day again. It's so funny.
Yeah. Actually, I can't make recording. I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday.
Gonna need to get you a mug for that. Do you not have a Watch Spoilers mug? Oh, there you go.
So Matt gets in, and a young, slim serving woman in a white dress soon up on the left to show green petticoats. And so that's what I was saying, like, this white dress with just green on the side sort of feels very much like you got this green stripe on the domes, like the people, white on the light colors on the outside, colors on the inside. The white is there to keep the heat off and reflective, as we see in a lot of hot environments.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
as you can see in my background, which is not
yes.
a fantasy landscape, that's a real landscape. Well, architecture-scape, but I love the architecture and painting internal design of Ebudar. I really love the descriptions of just, it's wild and colorful, and there's skies painted on the ceilings, and it sounds like a really pretty place.
And then there's the Riad.
Well,
which sounds like a completely different place. Like, there's two sides of
yeah.
the river, and one side is bougie and nice and painted and clean and white, and the other side is mud and dirty and smelly.
Yeah, it's a slum. It's not a refugee camp, but I imagine that it would be pretty easy to confuse the two if you didn't know what you were looking at. You know, corrugated rusty tin and, like, that look, I think, is what the Rahad's got going on.
I mean, looking at modern day Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, or, you know, any number of slums and refugee camps that have been there for like 20 plus years and just are getting ground in. And
I'm pretty sure this one's there for like 1,000 plus years, right?
yeah, I think it was the site of a city during like the Trolloc Wars. And
Right.
then for whatever reason, it got left behind when like the center of energy moved to the other side of the river.
But that's why the kin are there. That's the whole tradition of the kin being in the Riyadh, is they were in the city that became the Riyadh.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that their meeting house is on the other side, but yeah, their storage house is in the Rahad. So
Right.
yeah, for sure. And Matt notices that she's pretty, and then notes to himself that he's not noticing how pretty she is, which is like, you just commented on it. I think you're noticing.
It's the same thing when he's like, I'm not looking at the oval in Tylin's breast, and then he describes it in detail.
It's like, I look subtly.
Look, no, I know how to look subtly. You remember when he said that one?
Mm.
Yeah. No, you don't, Matt.
Yeah,
No,
actually,
you don't.
spoilers. No, you don't.
And she catches him. I think that's an important part of their interaction.
For sure. But first we have this really long, like, handoff process.
Yeah, so the dice almost meant danger and something. There's a little bit of he's hearing the dice in his head. That's been going on for a while. And then yeah, as he's being passed between these characters, these servants, we go from Master Jen to Hazel to Karen, Mistress Karen, to a woman named Mathilde, to Bren, a stout fellow, to a balding man, Madrick, and then a round woman called Laren. And one of those, in my research, turns out to be a dark friend later. And I want to know if Aradia can tell me which one.
I want to say it's Maddock. It's either Maddock or Laren. Those are my two guesses.
Why?
Maddock, because I'm pretty sure he comes up later, helping Matt with, or not helping Matt, as it were, when Matt's trying to escape from Tylin, and he's like, you know, squirreling his stuff away. And I want to say that Maddock is a servant who's like thwarting some of those plans. And then Laren, just because she runs off and then runs back. And I'm like, you could have been doing anything in those off-screen moments. So those are my guesses. Who is it?
The recall is scary. The recall is terribly scary. It's Maddock.
Ah, yes!
Uh-huh. Yep, just like you said it was. Yeah, so god damn. Like, two characters, I couldn't have pulled their names out of a hat.
But you did the research.
It can't be Laren because she's a round woman, and you know you always trust a round.
Oh right, yeah, of course.
But yeah, Maddock reports to Moradin that a large group just traveled and had a bunch of Angreal, including the Bull. This is in the Path of Daggers, and he didn't know where they were going. Moradin kills him.
Oh, he crushes him, right? And then the Golem shows up and sucks down all of his blood. Okay, I didn't remember that. I just remembered the interactions with Matt. I totally forgot that he's the one. He even gets named going to Moradin. How did I not remember that he was a dark friend? I was guessing that he was a dark friend on other evidence. I forgot that he literally gets pointed out as a dark friend.
He's got 3 appearances here in which he is named, and that is it. One where Matt bribes Maddox to help him move Oliver into his rooms to help him avoid Tylin.
Mm-hmm.
So he's bribable. That's interaction number 2. And then interaction number 3 is Moradin killing him.
Okay, so I did kind of misremember where he fits into that thing with Matt. But yeah, okay.
He'll pop up again in chapter 28.
Yeah, so he's an upper servant who's bribable. That makes him a very good target for being a dark friend.
Absolutely. But a lot of these other characters are literally, we only ever see them mentioned here.
They have backstories.
They have backstories, apparently, as we've been told. Hazel does help Matt move in, but that's, again, the only time we ever see her again. Maddox we talked about. Lauren, she is sort of the one we see all throughout this chapter. And then, as Matt prepares to leave the Riad, she brings him a note from Tylin and the red flowers and a bowl of oysters.
Right, because she's presumably like pretty close to Tylin, like really high up in that, one of her.
She's the final chain that takes him to her.
Yeah,
and is her sort of his interaction with.
So she's probably been with Tylin for a long time.
Exactly, but the rest of them are here and never seen again.
They're just in the masses of servants that exist because that's how fantasy works. But according to Robert Jordan, they've all got at least one-line backstories.
And so then on that trip, they encounter... I really like these two, Teslin and Jolene.
Yeah, I like them. They're fun.
They're such an odd couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thrown together by circumstance and bonded together in trauma.
The red and the green, which are seem kind of opposing, but they do. There's a bit of an alliance between the red and the green in the White Tower. So these are White Tower Aes Sedai.
Yes.
Teslin is the red, who's sort of, eats brambles and has, that, sort of shriveled up mouth. But I think she ends up being one of Matt's, favorite Aes Sedai.
Yeah,
that,
and she respects him.
They respect each other,
yeah.
I think. That's, I think, one of the few Aes Sedai he ends up respecting, which, again, we talk about how, the red are bad, they get these bad names, the red have Teslin, they have Pavara,
and,
there's some really good...
Sylviana,
yeah, there's some great examples of reds, and I think Teslin is probably my favorite.
Yeah, she's really cool because we don't ever know why she joined the red. We never get any of her, backstory, but she's clearly not warped in the way that so many red sisters are. She, just genuinely believes that that's an important task to fulfill. And then she gets punished by Elaida for some nonsense because Elaida needs to, show that she'll come down hard on a red sitter. And there's even a line here about how Tom doesn't understand why a red sitter, or any sitter, would have been sent to Abu Dar. And we know it's entirely because Elaida is trying to cow the other Aes Sedai in the tower. That's the only reason, which makes sense why Tom can't figure it out, because, he knows Elaida, but still.
And Jolene was punished because she was elected as actually a green sitter. And Elaida didn't like that, and that's why she ended up sending her away.
Oh, really? That's why? I thought that she, I thought that she was in charge of finding the girls after Rhonda Makira sent the letter.
Yes, so it ends up being 2 things. Jolene is responsible for finding Suan after she escapes.
Oh, yeah.
And fails. And so there's a penance. And then the Green Ajah goes ahead and elects her a sitter despite the penance.
Oh.
And that really pisses Elaida off. And so that's why she sends Jolene away.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, these 2 sisters are both loyal to the tower and to Elaida ostensibly, not necessarily friends, but then they're sent to this fly-speck kingdom and they just have to deal with it. And then when the Shanshan attack, Teslin gets captured and Jolene has to go into hiding, and they both end up being rescued by Matt as he escapes from Abu Dar, and they just become, this odd tag-along with him, and he ends up, pranking Jolene and becoming pretty decent friends with Teslin. I think Jolene actually tries to convince Matt to accept the warder bond, too, which is funny. And this is also, I think, maybe when Teslin puts the note in Matt's pocket, even though that doesn't make sense to me. This is the only time that I know of that they're in contact. And we do know that the reason she puts the note in his pocket is to spite Elaida, and she certainly has decided that Elaida needs spiting at this point.
Yeah, and it's not much of a note. It's just hey, these 2 need to be careful. I know you're friends with them. I think I interpret it more of just Teslin being a good person and,
No. She's trying to mess up Elida's plans.
Gotcha.
I mean, she tells Matt so later, and, you know, that's the only reason I can think of for her to do that, because she's ostensibly loyal to Elida. But so, yeah, apparently she's got this note in her pocket and is just waiting for an opportunity or something. But yeah, it happens here.
Because she's both the first person to grab him and the last person to let go.
And she keeps looking at him and talking to him and, like, pretending like the rest of them don't exist and giving him weird looks. And so, yeah, she's, doing that. But, yeah, he's asking Laren to be like, I just need to get to Elayne and Nyneave. How long does it take to find Aes Sedai? And then Teslin's like, you want Aes Sedai? I got your Aes Sedai right here.
So, can you name the 9 Aes Sedai?
Which 9?
In the palace.
Okay, Teslin, Jolene, Adelius, Vandene, Marilil,
Yep.
Nyneave and Elayne.
Yeah, okay, don't forget don't forget about
Don't forget
ours.
them.
Like,
and then there's 2 more.
there are 2 more.
Edicina?
Mm-mm.
Shit. No, yeah, because Edicina's with them when they leave because she gets brought by the Shan-Chan. Crap, no, I'm forgetting the other 2.
Sure, no, it's not obvious. So,
Oh, fuck, Sarithara, yes, who I literally have her page open on Watt Fandom. Oi.
And then what we don't find out until later in Crown of Thorns, chapter 30, is Cesarine is the 9th.
Cesarine?
Carine. Careane.
Oh,
Carine.
yeah. Yeah, I think she gets captured permanently by the Shan-Chan?
And I believe she is black. Yes, she is. She is black. So, she is demonic.
Oh, she's the dark friend who kills Adelius? What? Okay, the one who I do tend to confuse with Sarithara because they're paired together and both under suspicion. And then Sarithara's not the dark friend.
Right. Careane is.
Careane. Okay. But she's not in this scene. She's just in the palace.
Yes, and she is unnamed in this scene. Which, again, I was going to say that makes her a little suspicious because she's the only dark friend, and she's the only one who's not named.
Well, I mean, it's hard to be suspicious of someone who's not there, for the most part. It's challenging. Not impossible, but challenging.
So that was a bit of an unfair question, because
no?
I knew there was no way to get
that was a very fair question.
Yeah. But yeah, Sarithara is killed by Chesmal.
She never even got to the ageless look. She wasn't Aes Sedai for very long. Sarithara is a brown that just barely got her shawl.
Those poor browns just dropping left and right.
You know, that quest for knowledge can lead you into very dangerous places.
Just ask Baron.
Yeah, you'd think it would be the greens, but no, it's the browns.
I love the little Aes Sedai insult to Teslin. Do you stoop to kidnapping men in the halls now, Teslin? A man who cannot channel can hardly be of interest to you.
Aes Sedai shade.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, Red, back off. This is a man. He can't channel.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you're doing?
Yeah. So at first, the 2 of them are almost going to, like, grab him and, like, do something with him, carry him off, tie him up, and then Aes Sedai from the other side of the Great Divide show up.
And it's Adelius that shows up.
Mm-hmm. He assumes it's Vandene because she's behaving like a green, and then I love that line. Like, those 2 ought to wear signs or something.
Seriously, guys, like, I think Jordan deliberately confuses us about which one's which.
Oh, totally. The fact that they're real sisters and as near to identical twins makes no difference. Like, oh yeah, for sure. I do love this line here from Matt where, you know, the Aes Sedai are basically insulting Nyneave and Elayne, and he defends them in the same way that he defends Egwene, because Nyneave badly needed to be snatched down a peg or 6, and Elayne even more, but he was not about to stand by and listen to this woman talk Nyneave down. If that meant defending Elayne too, so be it.
See, and this is where he, like, separates out Elayne. I constantly ship him and Elayne. I tell you what, that would have been great. All the reasons that Tuon is a good match, I think Elayne would also have made a good match. The powerful, assertive woman who's very much in control. But the whole, like, combination of their relationship around guns and firearms that he creates, the fact that he's, like, an Andorman and she can always marry an Andorman, like, there's so much there. Part of me doesn't really like the relationship between Matt and Tuon.
Yeah, most of me doesn't like the relationship between Matt and Tuon. I don't see the chemistry. I don't like the politics. I don't like the implications for what happens after. It makes so much more sense for Elayne to get over her puppy love thing with Rand and then discover that one of his best friends is actually much more her style.
And then you get that, I'm thinking of How I Met Your Mother, where Barney sort of, when he finally does settle down, he's like the most loyal husband, even though he's a rogue and a player beforehand. It's like
totally
all he's
Matt.
really looking for, yeah, totally Matt. All he's really looking for is the right person to settle down with.
Yeah.
Eventually. Just don't fool yourself into thinking you're that person on a one-night stand.
Right. Yeah, there's a bunch of the Aes Sedai being like, we know who you are, we know that you're Taviran, we want to pack you up into the tower, and he's like, I have a medallion, nervous chuckling. I'm in danger!
Despite the flaws that Adelius and Vandine know about, and she's here, so oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Because they threw poop at him already.
Yeah, that happened.
Also, the lightning worked, so he died. So yeah, he's not linked to the Horn anymore, as it turns out.
Yep, but nobody knows that. Literally nobody thinks that. Then they're all the Aes Sedai are like sort of fighting over him without really acknowledging that he's there, and he's like trying to lighten the situation with humor, like, don't fight over me. There's enough to go around. And they all look at him like, shut up. That's not what we're doing here.
What are they doing there? That's the question. Like, what is this power struggle between the two groups?
I think it's honestly more about flexing power at each other than about Matt. I think that's really what's going on there, because there's this moment where they're talking about, like, it's only because we don't want to offend Tylin that we don't confine you and on bread and water rations and then drag you back to the tower by your hair. And Matt expected Morel to laugh in her face, but she shifted her head slightly as if she really wanted to break away from Jolien's gaze. There's a bunch of Aes Sedai power stuff happening there that has nothing to do with him, but he's an extremely useful rope in which to play that tug of war.
It reminds me when I'm playing chess and one pawn becomes the focus of all the other pieces. And it's like, as soon as you start trading, all that shit's going to go down. And the pawn doesn't really matter, but it's the focus of all the power.
Yeah, because the two groups of Aes Sedai both see the other as very, like, in the wrong, morally speaking. Like, this is a profound philosophical divide. This isn't just the normal power ranking of Aes Sedai. This is, like, which side of history are you on kind of ideological thing. And they're not able to resolve that because they're all in Ebu Dar trying to do something else. And here's a moment where they can, like, saber rattle over a shared interest. It's a lot of just power flexing that has so little to do with Matt. There are 5 of us. 7 if you include the children, whatever.
Who are much more powerful channelers than the two of you.
Yeah. And, I mean, Elayne's going to do her, like, stand up and assert authority thing in, like, a week, maybe? Like, she's about to grow up in their eyes.
Teslin's quote, "Consider well who you tie yourself to, Master Cawthin. Wrong choices can lead to an unpleasant future, even for Taviran. Consider well. Look, don't join those nerds over there. Like, join the cool group, associate with the cool group, and we won't pick on you." That's what they're trying to do, is convince him to, like, join the in-group, which is them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally, because he's a Taviran, and that's important, and...
But it's all about political status, just like high school on a global scale. Like, that's all the White Tower is.
It really is. It really, really is. It's so petty. But yeah, here we've got Teslin just being so interesting and just, like, looking at Matt. Yeah, and then Laren comes back and breaks the impasse. I don't know why she runs off.
Yeah, the sort of intense looking, the fact that everybody else backs off first, and she's the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know at what point she plants that on him. I think it's right before she walks away.
I agree, because she keeps looking at the other Aes Sedai and then looking at him. So I think she's deciding, I think she's making up her mind throughout this interaction. But she has the note ready. So she's pretty much already got her mind made up. But yeah, I agree. It's right as she lets go. Has got to be when she puts the note in his pocket.
And we should talk about the consequences of that note. Because it doesn't really affect anything that Matt does with the girls. But what it does do is make him feel like he's in debt to Teslin.
Which ends up leading to all the Windfinders getting released as well.
Exactly. Yes, because then he feels like he has to go free Teslin, which means he feels like he can't just sneak out with the girls, which means you need a tool, which is the Windfinders. Like, that whole note leads to Matt basically creating the rebellion in Ebu Dar of the Sea Folk.
And, you know, with respect to Teslin, her putting that note in his pocket is what makes it so she doesn't spend the rest of her life as a Damani. If she hadn't put that note in his pocket, he wouldn't have rescued her. Like, and that's a huge part of why she respects him, is because he rescues her. But there's no way that she knew she was giving herself a get out of jail free card by putting this note in his pocket. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about how that is the basis for all of the chaos that happens in Ebu Dar when he takes off. Like, yeah, the sea folk owe quite a lot to this note. So then Laren comes running back because she ran away to tell the queen that Mat was in the palace, I guess. I'm not really sure why she left when the Aes Sedai showed up, but she comes back here and gets him out of the situation.
Yeah, I assume she just went to go get advice. Was like, hey, this Mat's in the palace. I'm also guessing that Tylin has standing orders.
Yes, agreed. Actually, you know what I bet it was, is she was not leading Mat to Tylin at first, and then the Aes Sedai show up, and she's like, okay, sweet, this is my opportunity to go see if Tylin does want to see him now or not.
That makes more sense, yeah.
You know, because yeah, I agree. The way that Tylin approaches Mat suggests that she has standing orders. Like, if he ever shows up, just direct him this way.
And we know that Laren is close to her.
Probably like one of her senior maids or whatever. So yeah, she comes back and breaks Mat free, which is good for him.
Release him, Adlius. And he's like, oh, not wrong.
So wear different hair ribbons or something.
Yeah, and I sympathize with that. I forget which one's which all the time.
And then Mat thinks about how Aes Sedai are scary, and then is like, I'm sure that you were just lying to get me out of that awkward situation. The queen has no reason to see me. And Laren's like, do I look like I lie about what my monarch wants? Does that look like the person I am?
Mat, that's motivated reasoning. He doesn't want to see the queen, so he's like, of course you're lying, because otherwise I have to go see the queen, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And, like, honestly, he should have been suspicious at this point. Like, why would the queen... Well, seeing him is one thing. The whole, like, oh, yeah, the only place to write a note is on my table over here is like, Mat, you should have been suspicious right there. Tylin Quintara, by the grace of the light, Queen of Altara, Mistress of the Four Winds, Guardian of the Sea of Storms, High Seat of House Mitsobar, and a predator.
But I will say, Mat's gaze is very flirtatious here.
Mm-hmm.
She was well worth seeing.
Oh, yeah.
He
she
decided.
Is imposing.
She might make an Aes Sedai step back.
Mm-hmm.
Like Isabella Dalcalian, who made the Emerlin Aganda come to her.
Mm-hmm. And then he, like, calls her Majesty and, like, flourishes an imaginary cloak and, like, forgets to not speak in the old tongue. Like, he's impressed.
Yeah, he's impressed. He greets her in a very flourish, very fancy way. That is very much like...
Does a court bow and then claims to not be a lord.
Totally.
Like...
Right. It's like kissing a woman's hand and saying, oh, I'm not flirting.
Yeah, like...
Madame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that just makes it even more flirtatious, right?
It's very flirtatious. It really is. Because that's the way he walks into a room. He flirts with the pretty women right away and sees what their response is, and then gauges that response to decide whether or not to pursue them further.
Yeah, and Tylin is like, bring me that handsome, dashing rake. He seems to get around, and he's pretty. I want to look at him closer up. And then he walks in and is like, hey. It's like, I can see where she thought he was inviting his advances in this scene. This is some exploratory flirting. And I love this line. The more bosom a woman displayed, the less she wanted you to look. Openly, at least. Yeah, that's more or less... I mean...
Explain that to me, because that is a confusing statement.
Well, I cannot speak for all women, because I very rarely feel like putting on that much of a female facade and, like, doing that. And certainly there's lots of women who are like, keep your eyeballs off me if I'm naked. That's certainly a thing. But the more you dress up, the more you want to be admired. But you don't want to be catcalled. You don't want to be leered at. You don't want to be, like, grabbed. You just want people to admire you. You put on a costume, you expect someone to appreciate it. So I don't quite know about, like, if all women universally want their tits looked at just because they're wearing a titty shirt. But certainly I feel like it's not an untrue statement in many situations.
But at the same time, I don't think someone who's wearing a high-cut dress is like, oh yeah, look at my titties, either.
Sure.
right? Like, you know, I the correlation there is what bothers me.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I think it's further complicated by the fact that, you know, I'm speaking from a world where being catcalled and assaulted is a very normal thing that women have to negotiate, and Jordan has written a world in which that is much less of a constant in people's minds, and that
certainly Abu Dar, if someone catcalls you, you get to turn around and stab them.
Yeah, and you know, and also when you're in a position of privilege, you tend to be less sensitive to the hazards that might come if you're less privileged. So
that's why Matt claims to be a lord.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it's complicated. There's a lot of layers to that, but I think in Tylin's case and in Abu Dar in general, I think that the show don't touch kind of dynamic is very present in the interaction between the sexes. But as someone who only has a passing acquaintance with femininity, I'm spitballing.
Or by your summons do I come. We get a translation for that.
It's a very fancy way of speaking.
Diani dio niet kyokon karya yi. I have no idea if that's anywhere close to what it should be.
Michael Kramer clearly practiced it like 400 times before the final take of the audiobooks. It rolls off his tongue so well. I'm like, that was like a 3-day mission or something.
Or he's just that good and did it first time.
I mean, he is that good, probably. So
good. Yeah, I'll be honest. Hearing both of them read live, I think Kate Redding is a better, and also based on what they said, right, in the interview. Mm-hmm. She does fewer takes. She reads longer chunks without making mistakes. He tends to redo the same sentence multiple times, more than she does.
Diende duniente conscion caliatier.
That was good.
I mostly am just playing the MP3 in my head and just repeating it.
I'm impressed you can do that too, actually.
That's how I can recall so much of this stuff. The audio files are burned into my brain. Yeah, I tend to spend my Wheel of Time energy. If I'm not outputting Wheel of Time content, I'm trying to listen to other people's podcasts and like get into the other ways that people are thinking about it and what's happening in the community. Like, it just, the actual canon material is fading down the list.
It really is, yeah. I mean, but there's so much second and third order material to consume that the first order material is like, yeah, I mean, I've done that a lot. Like, I don't need to do it again. And we're doing it in such detail as we do the podcast as well.
Yeah, especially anything before book 11. Like, I've just gone through it so many times, you know?
So the next thing I have is him writing the note. So he's like, I'm going to go ahead and leave a note for them because I can't find them, because aren't they just out in the city, right?
They're doing the conversation with the sea folks still, right? This is the same day?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, Avienda's currently beginning her panic attack on the way back in the little rowboat is probably about where they're at this point. But yeah, his note is, it's not a great foreshadowing of that horrible letter that Brandon Sanderson should never have had him write later, but it does, this could have been the basis for why that letter could have been funny.
This is what I assume the basis of that letter is. However, if he'd gone back and actually read this, he would see he uses full sentences and correctly spelled words. And yes, his handwriting is a little blocky because he doesn't do it very often, and I imagine he has a bit of an awkward hand, right? Like, what do you think, he's lefty-handed?
When right? I was going to say, with an arm curling around it, I'm like, are you a lefty, Matt?
He's a lefty. He's definitely a lefty.
Like, as a lefty, high fives.
Yeah. But no, he has to be. He has to be a lefty. That would also explain why he has such advantage in fighting, right? No one's used to fighting a lefty.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Also, just left-handed people are better. Pro tip, we're better. That's why there's only 10% of the population is left-handed, is because the world can't handle that much awesome.
It's one of those things where I think there is a natural advantage to being left-handed. I remember reading about this, that like if there's too many left-handers and it's 50-50, it's no longer a natural advantage and it tends to fade away. But then like when you get to about 30%, that stabilizes.
Huh, never heard that.
The idea that language is in the right side, which controls our left hand. And so the right side of our brain is mostly taken up with language processing, and the left side is mostly taken up with the motor skills, so it's easier to control your right hand with your motor skills, right? So there's a certain evolutionary advantage to being right-handed. However, there are other advantages to being left-handed as long as left-handedness is a minority. And so it's worth it to do that swap in your brain for a certain percentage of people as long as it's the minority. Once it becomes too much of a minority or equal amounts, there's no advantage anymore, and the brain defaults back to language on the right, motor skills on the left.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, this is also a good plug for just everyone train yourself to be ambidextrous. It's not that hard, and it's really good for your brain plasticity, and then you can operate scissors no matter what. And if you ever have a hand injury, you'll be fine. I think everyone should at least practice a little bit with the opposite hand. For just doing Scrabble scores. Just do Scrabble scores in your non-dominant hand. It's better for your brain. I mean, I switch the mouse, actually, on my computer all the time. Every several months, I will switch which hand I'm using on my mouse. I'll just switch which button is primary, and just... It's good for all the pain I give myself with computing. It's just switch to the other side. This will be fine. And then he bites the pen, because he's a dork. And he scores it with his teeth because it's literally a gold pen, which seems silly, but okay. Do we want to talk about the content of the letter?
Yes. Okay,
so he tells them about Millie Skane and that she's hanging out with Carradine, which he ends up also telling Tylin, and she's like, figures.
The girls, they take that information to heart, though, right? I feel like, don't they use that at some point? Don't they spy on Jacob Carradine or something?
Yeah, they do. They do the whole, Mask of Mirrors hanging out in front of the palace to see what they can spot. Avienda and Brigida do that for the most part, I think. Well, Brigida's obviously not Mask of Mirrors. Well, no, she is, because it gets tied off on her. Yeah, they do take a little bit of notice of that, but since they weren't inclined to trust Carradine in the first place anyway, it's not like it really puts them on guard. They were already on guard. It's freaking Carradine.
Because he sends Elayne a letter being like, hey, I've got your mother in...
Yeah, Niall's got your mom back in Amador. It's no big deal. I'll escort you home. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
And she's like, you lying son of a bitch.
She's like, how about I fucking don't? And then, Matt very deliberately tells himself he's not trying to insult the girls, insults them roundly, and then considers it a job well done. And it's just the really good way to get people to listen to you is to insult them. Works every time.
They could not ask for pleasanter than that. Is pleasanter even a word?
It is now.
Oh, Matt. Yeah, no, it's one of those, I never really understood this letter, but it's dude, filter. Put a filter between your brain and your mouth.
Seriously.
Some small, tiny... You think there's nothing here but heat and flies? They think there's something here but heat more. There's a reason they're looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the whole, let me take you back to Egwene. And it's what, are we parcels now? Have a little respect. If you want us to listen to you, treat us like we're adults. And then he gets his first look at the ring he bought.
Right, or at least the crest of it.
Yeah, because this is, again, the same day, right? He just came from following Millie Skane. He hasn't really looked at the ring, particularly. And when he's like, oh, hey, I got a signet ring I can use to seal this wax. What's the design? And then he, assigns a bunch of meanings to it that are not the correct meanings, but he likes it, which is fun.
Also, reasons that Tylin thinks he's Lord, he has a frickin' signet ring.
Granted, it's made of stone rather than fancy metal, but it's a fancy signet ring. It's all long and...
Is it made of stone?
I believe so.
I thought it was a metal ring. I mean, it's got a gem in it, right?
Does it?
And the gem is what's been...
I always thought that it was...
Because at least when you buy it from Tavern Teas, it's one solid piece of metal with the signet carved into it.
Oh, yeah. No need to pull. You might crack the stone. I always assumed that meant the stone of the ring. The whole ring was made of stone. But it could, yeah.
No, I think the stone is, that's how you do rings, right? You have a metal band with the stone, not, your geology mind went, stone, that means rock, as opposed to
I'm like, this
stone,
is a broken earth, sort
gem.
of
Yeah.
ring.
By stone, they mean the gem that the thing is carved into. And I imagine it's a pretty big piece of topaz or something like that.
Yeah, semi-precious. And he says, the ring merchant says, gold, but I work in silver as well.
So it's a gold ring.
And he looks at the dark oval of carved stone. I'm like, stone equals rock. But, as I would be the first to tell you, rocks can be minerals.
Rocks are minerals, Marie.
Okay, cool. So, my entire vision of what the ring looks like just totally changed. He doesn't mention what kind of rock or what kind of mineral stone it is, but it's dark.
Yeah, he doesn't even give it a color.
Yeah, it's got to be just some, super common, semi-precious, decently hard stone, so that way the carver can make really like precise carvings in it.
It might not even be semi-precious. It might just be like a river rock that's dark that you can carve into.
Yeah.
That's mounted in a ring. Because all he's doing is trying to show off his carving skills. It might not even be a semi-precious stone. It might just literally be a stone that he was carving into.
Well, you'd want it to be a material that would interact with your tools the same as precious stones that you would be carving. And
probably something with some sparkle.
Yeah. And rocks break in a lot of different ways. So it would have to be a similar kind of material to what he's actually selling. But that could be a rock. But there's a lot of like really like quartz, for example, is like go out into certain parts of the world and like kick a rock over its quartz. Like granted, quartz is usually pale, so it's probably not what this is, but
obsidian or something like that?
Obsidian would be terrible because it's glass. Obsidian would actually be like the worst possible thing to make a carved piece out of. But like maybe some really neat basalt. Maybe that's I don't know.
You're the geologist. Give me some answers.
I'm not a lapidary. Should be, but lapidarist?
Isn't that another word for a stripper?
No.
Someone who sits on laps. Someone who specializes in laps. A lapidarist.
Well, I'm not that either.
Someone who gives lap dances. A lapidarist.
I kind of really like that now.
That's what I thought of when you said it. What's the word even? What does the word actually mean?
Someone who carves jewels, does jewelry stuff. Like if you had a diamond and you wanted to get it cut into smaller pieces, you'd go to a lapidary. If you just had a random gem and you were like, I don't know how fancy-tastic this is, you'd go to a lapidary. Like they can cut around flaws, set stones. Like they're in the jewelry business. I don't know what the origin of that word is at all.
Oh, trust me, if I want my stones to get cut, I go to a lapidary.
You stop drinking that beer, sir. I heard you crack a second one.
I have not had much beer in the last many months, so 2 beers is like, ooh, I'm feeling it.
I haven't had a beer in almost a week. So,
oh, baby.
It's good for me. It's good for me. It's good for me. I will be such a cheap date when this period is over.
That's what's happening to me right now. I'm like, okay, 1 full beer over an hour, and I'm cracking into the second one, and I'm being like, oh, I'm slurring my words. And
description of the ring. Matt likes it because he needs to be crafty as a fox to keep up with Nyneave and Elayne, who are not exactly flighty, but not exactly not flighty. It's a fun interpretation.
And also the medallion, right?
Yeah, he's just fond of foxes in general.
He is the fox, right? I mean, like, the fox is Matt, right? The fox that makes the ravens fly. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the symbol on his thing. It's just, like, Matt is the fox.
He puts Nynaeve's name on it, and then Elaine's as an afterthought.
Well, I mean, for him, Egwene and Nynaeve are his village. Those are the people he's loyal to. They just happen to be friends with this princess who he doesn't like at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's only later when he has to, like, needs the connection for the resources of a kingdom that he goes to her and is like, so, you know, all those times I rescued you?
Yeah. Cashing in now.
So he turns around with a letter, and Tylin is standing right here. Mm-hmm. Right in front of his face. And he jumps back, staring at her face. Just her face. What are the odds that you think he actually succeeds in staring at just her face?
The fact that he's trying means he's failing.
Right.
His eyes are, like, flickering up and down, like, oh, don't look. But, you know, she, at this point, is trying to gauge his interest. Like, that's what this is she's like, so if I come on to you, where does that go? So she's watching his face very explicitly to see where his eyes go.
Uh-huh.
And this is not a test of his control. This is a test of his interest. He tells her about Caridin, our entertaining dark friends, and she's like, oh, yeah, that sucks. All right, moving on. Because what can she do about it, right?
Just she can't do anything about it right away? Is that why she dismisses it?
I mean, honestly, I think it's because she's more interested in Matt. I think she's a little bit distracted and is like, yeah, shush. Tell me something I want to hear. I
was also thinking that might just be that she already doesn't trust Caridin and already, like, doesn't want to give him an inch, and
Yeah.
that doesn't really change her strategy around him at all. It's like, yeah, I already don't trust him. He's already terrible. I already don't want him here, and there's nothing I can do about it. So now he's a white cloak, and
Yeah, I totally think that's what's really going on. And she's like, shitty person is shitty. Shocker.
And then I think what we get what the most interesting part of this to me is how she talks about what the daughter heir and Nyneave Sedai say about him.
And
what they don't say about. Yeah. I hear what is not said. You are an untamed rogue, a gambler, and a chaser after women. And that, certainly he is. But there's a certain amount of non-discretion implied there.
Mm-hmm.
A chaser after all women, which Matt is not.
No. It implies that he will chase anything in skirts, and that's what all the women around him think, and that's not who he is. He evaluates everyone in skirts, but he does not chase all of them.
And I think that is partially why she thinks that her advances will be welcome no matter what.
There's a whole discussion to be had there about, like, just because you did it with one person doesn't mean you want to do it with another person. Like, those assumptions are toxic and harmful, but I see where she's coming from. He's got this reputation, and she's like, you want some of this? You want some of this? Which is not an unfair question, given the reputation that he's got in her mind.
She's also the most powerful woman in a matriarchal society.
And being a consort like that is a normal part of their culture and is an honor. It's a last fling. It's a way to get lots of trinkets and attention showered on you and have a good time. Like, it's not an unreasonable thing for her to say, hey, I need a pretty. You want in on this position?
It's basically an internship.
Yeah, basically.
Sex included and everything.
Yeah, and she's a ruler. Like, she's not exactly used to people not wanting to spend time with her getting her favor.
All I'm saying is Tylin and Bill Clinton would get along really well.
Oof. Matrim Lewinsky? This is terrible.
By the way, Monica Lewinsky has turned out to be just an incredible speaker and kind of an inspiring person as she's gotten older. So if you've never looked into what she's doing these days, you should go check her out. She's kind of impressive.
I feel like I heard that much about her several months ago and never pursued that thread further. So I probably should do that.
Just especially talking about like internet bullying and that sort of culture.
Yeah. She's a big spokesperson for issues that really need to be spoken about. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. For some reason, a victim of our toxic culture speaks out about our toxic culture.
Well, honestly, that's a fairly rare thing.
That's true. It takes a lot of bravery to speak out and react to that, even when you are the one affected.
Yeah, and to hold fast to that publicity even when it's really negative. Like, it's a badass move.
But yeah, one learns to hear what is not said is, I believe, the theme of this one.
And then she gets way too touchy-feely. Like, it's one thing to be like, hey, here's an opportunity, and it's another thing to just, like, keep touching when the person's not responding at all. It's just like, if a High Lord of Tyr did this to Elayne, we would all be rioting and burning the books to the ground. Like, this much physical contact, like running your finger along their lips and all of that is like, that is way too intimate for not having gotten any kind of consent or at all. Like, she's predatory. He even says at some point in here that she seems like a predator. Predatory gleam in her eyes. It's like, yeah, you think. And
I'm gonna go back to Lan and Myrell, right? Like, in him flinching when she touches him.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so.
There's a lot of role reversal going on in this book, where the men are robbed of power, and the women don't necessarily treat them well.
Or see anything wrong with it.
Or see anything wrong with not treating them well.
Yeah.
And I believe that is Jordan absolutely, like, saying this is how men treat women a lot of the time, and pointing it out and making us uncomfortable with it by making it women doing it instead of men doing it. Because if it was men doing it, we'd, at least in the 90s, have just been like, oh yeah, of course, that's fine. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if a High Lord of Tyr had done this to Elayne, we would have been like, well, classic fantasy trope. It's gross, but...
Basically what Ravine did to Morghese.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
What Valda's doing to Morghese. Morghese gets raped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, Morghese really gets the fuzzy end of the lollipop on all of this. And then we've got Matt doing the whole, like, women don't behave this way. It's so unnatural. That's why I'm disturbed. And it's like, dissociation much?
Well, and again, this is where unreliable narrator. Women don't behave this way. Except a bunch of those memories suggest they did. Except he has a bunch of memories of women behaving exactly like that. So this is very much his own prejudice, his own personal raising, his own, like, women don't advance on men because I consider that inappropriate, not because I don't have memories of that happening.
He's lying to himself, and it does him no good at all.
Matt's resistance to Tylin has a lot to do with his perception of how relationships should proceed, and less to do with whether or not he wants to be in the relationship.
He doesn't even get to that question. He's so hung up on, like, well, this isn't how it should be.
When you watch him, when he walks in the room, he's like, oh, she was definitely worth seeing. He checks out her boobs. Like, he thinks she's hot, and I guarantee if she acted like a quote-unquote normal woman, he would have been flirting with her and trying to sleep with her. Maybe.
The whole queen thing puts him off.
The queen thing, but, yes, right. Well, and that's where, if she hadn't been a queen,
yeah,
hadn't been this assertive, powerful woman.
For sure. Yeah, he's totally been with older women before. Like, we see that, like, completely. Yeah, he's very confused by the encounter, and she moves way too fast for him to, like, sort out the convolutions of what's happening in his head.
And luckily, she's interrupted by Beslan walking in.
Yeah, which then makes for such an awkward situation that doesn't get any less awkward as the chapters go on. The whole Beslan, Tylin, Matt, like, the way Beslan fits into that is just like, wow.
I think what Jordan's trying to do there is just point out what's normal in the culture, which is, like, women are extremely sexually liberated, and as a single woman, Beslan expects his mother to go out and find men to sleep with.
That's actually really fair.
Yeah, just like, frankly, you see bachelors and they end up divorcing their wives and they move out and they're in this, like, bachelor pad, and you always see the trope is the daughter's like, Dad, I want you to find someone to love and someone to take care of you, and, like, go find someone to sleep with. Like, there is that very much, like, don't be lonely, Dad. Like, don't be lonely, Mom. Like, go find someone to be with, even if it's not my parent.
But the whole thing where it's like, hey, Mom, I'm going to go hang out with your boyfriend, and we're going to go get drunk and do all this. That part's less common. I mean, not in Abu Dar. It's common in Abu Dar, but that's not part of the trope normally.
That is true. The you're sleeping with someone my age who I'm going to go hang out with then and entertain.
Yeah, that part gets a little weird in this world.
Going back to Matt as an unreliable narrator, how much of that is that Tylin sees the connection to Rand and is like, Beslan, you need to go make this connection. Like, this is someone who could be a powerful ally for our city. Yeah.
Oh, sure. But the whole part where Beslan's like, oh yeah, you're sleeping with my mom, that's not bothering me at all. Let's continue to be friends. Like, Beslan's attitude towards that always feels very, like, I can't imagine anyone in our world being like that. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but, like...
See, I totally can.
Really?
Like,
oh.
Yeah, my roommate, right? Like, his relationship with his mother, well, she's she, first of all, was very young when she had him, so the age difference is small. Second of all, she's been single most of his life. Third of all, they both sleep with men. Like, there's a certain amount of, like, yeah, you go get it, girl, like, that goes on between the two of them.
I guess I just don't know that many people.
So I feel like, even in my own personal life, I feel like it's a relationship I've encountered more than a few times, especially when the age gap is small between the two generations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, actually, now I'm thinking about it. So my stepmom is quite a bit younger than my dad. She was about 15 when I was born, so she could technically have been my mom if she was a teen mom. And her partner now, because she's not with my dad anymore, is basically my husband's age. So when we hang out, yeah, it's really interesting how, the same age, my stepmom's partner for several years now is very much just Brandon and I's age. And, like, we could all just be friends, generationally speaking. And so, yeah, okay, I guess there is one relationship in my life where that's not weird. But it's still, like, not... I don't think it's something I've seen a lot. And then the way that Beslan just rolls with it in here, I think... is a way, yeah, like as you were saying, for Jordan to really illustrate how the Ebudari culture approaches this kind of sexual liberation. And
I think it's supposed to make you uncomfortable because you are in the heteronormative American white culture.
yeah, it's good world building because it's so odd. And Matt and Beslin do end up being decent friends, despite the fact that Matt really resists this imposed friendship. They do go through a lot together.
Yeah, he hates being friends with nobles, even though, like, his second is a noble, and most of his good friends are nobles, and he spends a lot of time with nobles, and he is a noble.
Yeah. I think Tom ends up actually befriending Beslin more in the end.
Tom is doing a lot of kingdom building with Beslin, because Tom cannot keep his fingers out of politics no matter what country he is, and that man has a problem. Let me tell you something.
Yeah. It's like an addiction.
He really needs to, like, back the fuck off the politics for a minute. Like, how the fuck does Tom go to the middle of nowhere and discover the freaking Dragon Reborn, right? Like, he can't keep his finger out of the politics. There's no way.
And then he doesn't like the Shan-Shan, and he wants to see Beslin not, completely screw his kingdom over. It's like he can't help getting involved, but I always feel like Matt and Beslin's relationship is one of proximity rather than of genuine, like, friendship. Because they hang out a lot, but I never really see Matt, like, care about Beslin.
Drinking buddies.
Yeah.
They're drinking buddies, right? They meet up at the bar, but they don't have a lot going on besides their drinking and fighting lives. They both have their own separate interests, and so that sort of they diverge on their own paths.
Yeah, they just don't really ever see them, like, get closer than they have to be.
Although I can definitely talk about the Outrigger novels, like Matt heading back to Ebu Dar as well, that's the seat of power of the Shan-Shan, and he's the emperor, and so him and Beslin is technically ruling the seat of power of the Shan-Shan Empire. So would Matt not go there? And he's the king of Raven. So it's like, I feel like there would have to be some political interaction between the two of them, and their current relationship would then have significant benefits moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think they don't like each other. I feel like, like Talmanis and Nalisi and Matt actually likes because of their proximity. And Beslin, I don't see ever being in that category.
He thinks that Beslin is pretty dumb.
Yeah, smarter than his other friends, than Beslin's friends, because he's the only one that, like, notices that Brigida is both warder and, like, total hottie with a body. In the Festival of Birds scene, he's like, oh, I didn't know that the warder could wear so few feathers. That's pretty cool. And none of his friends noticed that. He's an interesting, like, very far down their character that doesn't really do a whole lot that's super interesting, but he's important at the same time. And the scene with Tuon and Beslin is one of my favorite Tuon scenes, honestly.
That is a really good interaction between the two of them.
Beslin comes in and is like, yeah, I accidentally killed one of my friends, and that's a little unfortunate. And she's like, oh yeah, that's a bummer. You might have to, like, sleep with his wife or his widow, and that would be really inconvenient. So avoid that. And Matt's just like, wait, you just killed someone on accident? And your mother is more concerned with you getting hitched than with what? Which, again, more of that Ebu Dar culture building.
I want to call out Hermione, saying she needs to seriously work on her priorities. Like, there's some weird priorities going on in this city. And again, this is Jordan trying to culture build and show us that, like, what they think of as normal is not what we think of as normal.
Yeah, and we are very much meant to empathize with Matt here. Matt is us in this situation, being like, we are out of our depth and we do not like. And then Beslin's like, hi, I'm a soft, pretty boy. Also, I like to get in fights and chase women.
I do like how we think of Beslin as sort of like a soft, like, a whatever fighter. But, like, he must have killed a bunch of people. Like, he's not a nothing fighter. He must be very, very good with the sword.
Yeah. It's, he's, like I said, we don't get to see that much of him. So he's interesting in that regard. But we don't see much of him, so he's boring in that regard.
And I feel like our main characters have leveled up so much that, like, Beslin, an excellent swordsman, is considered, like...
Yeah, he's just an NPC.
Truly a tertiary character.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And, Tylin, I think, is trying to attach him to Beslin for multiple purposes. Like you said before, there's the Dragon Reborn connection of, like, my son should be friends with one of these movers and shakers of the world. I don't think that she's trying to make that friendship happen so she can pursue Matt, but it doesn't hurt to have him coming around more often and in her sphere of influence more often if she is going to pursue him farther, which he didn't manage to give her anything more than confused signals in this interaction. Right. So, as much as I do not like how Tylin behaves towards him, I can see why she thinks that she still has a chance to, like, pursue that connection farther.
Well, and the first thing she says is, this is Matt Cawthon. He's Taviran. Right? Like, those are the two things you need to know about him. The important thing is he is Taviran, and that's why you should get to know him, because he could make things better for us.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt's just like, these people are both insane. Can I leave now? Unfortunately, the pattern is going to say, no, Matt, no, you cannot.
No, we're going to drop a wall on you to keep you here. You need to wait for Tuon.
He was going to leave so much sooner that the pattern had to literally drop an entire wall on him to keep him held down.
What happened to my bloody luck? Your luck needs you here, Matt.
Yeah.
Your luck needs you here. Hunting for girls. I mean, I assume that's what Beslin was talking about. What else could he be talking about when he says hunting at the festivals?
A girl or a fight.
Well, I guess a girl or fight. Yeah, that's
because those are the two things that get your blood pumping and make life worth living. Adrenaline junkie, this kid.
Bet he would love skydiving once it gets invented.
Totally. Totally.
I mean, it kind of was invented in the last battle.
It was more like an emergency parachute out of an airplane that was... No, you're right.
Yeah, that's skydiving.
Yeah.
An emergency parachute out of an airplane is skydiving.
Well, except for the emergency part. The thing with skydiving is you're jumping out of a perfectly good plane.
Right. So, like, the only difference between skydiving and an emergency parachute jump is whether or not the plane's on fire.
Exactly.
Right, yeah. So,
and I mean, I gotta say, skydiving, that's fun.
Yeah, you mentioned that a few times.
I really want to do it again sometime, because Brandon didn't go the one time I went, and it's like, he really wants to do it. I'm like, yes, let's do this.
How long were you in freefall?
A lifetime, I think. I think it was like 15 seconds, maybe. We didn't go up that high. I want to say that the website told us how long we'd be in free fall, and I want to say it was a minute, but there's no way it was a minute. Like, that's a long time to be in free fall. It's probably like 15, 20 seconds. But with the way the adrenaline went, it
pretty high. Yeah.
Down.
Sure.
Apparently, I was talking a mile a minute when we landed.
You?
I thought I was talking slow because I was so shaky, and my mom said she could barely understand what I was saying. Like, I was in a completely different, like, frame of time because, free fall. So much fun.
I kind of want to go on one of those airplanes that does the free fall.
The Vomit Comet?
Yeah. The Vomit Comet, yeah.
Yeah, and the more that we get space plane stuff, the longer those flights are going to be able to last. Low Earth orbit, we might be able to just be like, how long do you want to be in free fall? We can do that within a few hours sort of time frame.
Folks, here's the goal. I want you to donate enough money to watch spoilers that Aradia and I can go up in a SpaceX vehicle and go into freefall. I think that's a worthy goal.
We'll record something from up there for you guys.
We'll record something from space.
Yes,
it might not be that long. So this is what it's like being the Dark One. I think we've reached the end of this chapter.
At 1:37, so you almost nailed the first time, right?
What was my first time?
I think you said like an hour 35, and it's going to come down to an hour 14. So given our tangents and rambles, I think you're pretty much on the money. Here today.
All hail the chief. What? No, it's not that cold, right?
Apparently it was. I mean, it didn't hail for long, but it was like bursts of rain, and then there was hail in one of those cycles. It's cold if you go high enough up in the sky.
That's a good point. Yeah, elevation makes a difference.
Yeah, it's been nice having rain. We had 0.2 inches of rain to record this morning, and then we've probably gotten that much again already. So after days of sun and heat, it's nice to actually get some precipitation because it's not fucking summer yet.
We got a day of rain, and then it cooled down significantly. It was like the cold air came through, the cold front came through. So this feels more like spring now, as opposed to summer, which it's been for the last month.
Yeah, which is like, no, stop, go away. Not ready for you yet.
It very much kind of felt like someone used the bowl of the winds. Like, there was just like hot, cold front. Now it's kind of chilly outside.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wrong season, like it went backwards.
So, yeah, that's my exciting news is it's less dry outside now. How about you?
Things are going to get back to normal, and everyone's sort of, I feel like it's the calm before the storm.
Mm-hmm.
That it's really been like everyone's getting vaccinated and all of that sort of coming around, and things are kind of starting to open up again, but they're not quite there yet. So I'm just waiting to see. I may or may not start working again very soon. We got season 2 announced, was greenlit.
Yes.
That's the great news. You know, if you're trying to time us, that happened. Well, there was a slight drop on Twitter, and then it happened today.
Yeah, then Rafe did a Q&A that I've seen some very illuminating screenshots from.
For those of you who care, me and Aradia took a shot at doing a Patreon episode, and I thought it was pretty good. We did the whole thing, a lot of really interesting video and tech stuff. But I was trying out new technology, and I didn't record Aradia's audio, and we didn't make a backup, so...
Yeah, I trusted Seth to get everything and didn't open up Audacity, which was a mistake. Always do the backups. Never trust that the other person has it together.
How many times have I asked for the backups, and have I ever needed them? No. That time, I didn't ask for it. Did I need it? Abso-fucking-lutely. That's how it works, folks. Make your backups, because the only time you won't need them is when you don't have them.
So we'll be redoing that. But the cool thing is that we've got a little bit more content to talk about for that episode. So, you know, the pattern wove us some better content, I guess.
Oh, yeah, and you were on the Dusty Wheel yesterday, which was awesome.
Yeah.
I watched that.
Wasn't I?
Yeah.
Forgot already.
Some sort of... What other Wheel of Time? Oh, nothing. Just was on the Dusty Wheel with a couple of thousands of viewers. And
yeah, it had like 1,000 views when I went to like look at it like this morning. I was just like, I wonder if I feel like watching this. No, not yet. But it already had 1,000 views. I mean, I'm assuming that includes the people who watched it live. But yeah, that was really fun. That was me and Drew from Inking Out Loud. And we were going through 14 theories for how Rand lit the pipe. And that was really fun. We actually got through it in a reasonable amount of time, even though there was 14 of them. My preferred theory didn't win the popular vote, but that's fine. It's still right.
The pipe is a Terangrial that can light itself if you think at it.
Yeah.
I'm going with that.
No, that is so incorrect. That is the one that got voted on, though, isn't it? Or that got...
I don't think so.
I forget.
No,
people didn't like that one. I think the one that made it through was Tar Pocket, which... Ugh.
No, the whole thing was very entertaining, and everyone should definitely go check it out. And if you're coming here from there, welcome.
Yeah, that was really, really fun. I enjoy being on the Dusty Wheel. So, you know, we're just the beating heart of the content, and they're the outreach team. It's
right.
Very, like, you know, healthy symbiosis deep inside the circus. Like, we're way back in there. You have to, like, know your way around a little bit. But Dana Green gets you in, Dusty Wheel makes you comfortable, and then you finally get to our den of inequity.
What's the girl that Matt finds when he's looking for Oliver, who's standing outside a place, and he's like...
I forget her name, but yeah.
In a red coat, and she's like, a boy in a... Wait, what color coat did you say it was?
Yeah, she just stands out there and is pretty, and that's her job. So basically, Daniel Green, that's who you are. You're just standing out there being pretty. Disheveled goblin pretty.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?